Hi, this is Cass. I just want to pop in here really quick before we get started with today's episode. We're discussing alpha, beta, and omega dynamics today. That comes with topics of discussion that surround transphobia, homophobia, some discussions of biological human sex and gender, as well as topics surrounding dubiously consensual relationships, non-consensual sexual relationships, underage relationships. If any of these are things you are sensitive to or think maybe you're not interested in, I strongly encourage you to take care of yourself. It's okay to miss an episode. Maybe read the transcript. It's okay, though. Take care of yourself. If you don't want to listen to this, that's totally okay. All that being said, hi, and welcome back to the Author's Note. Or hi, if you're listening for the first time. How are you doing today, Teese?
I'm okay, Cass. How are you? I don't really have that much to say, I guess, but how are you?
I'm okay. Yeah. Today's topic has left me feeling a little bit bruised.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Me too. I mean, like, I've known about it, like, in the shallows, but I feel like, dare I say, I'm in the deep end now. I always knew about it. I knew where it originated from, but I sure feel like there's a whole new meaning to the word the not.
Oh, God. Yeah, so this week we did some pretty extensive research on ABO, or alpha, beta, omega, and we both read the progenitor fic for this subgenre of fandom. I want to disclaim that, like, I have read ABO fics before this, and I think we both came to the conclusion that we're not necessarily fans of it in that we seek it out, but, like, if it pops up and it sounds interesting by that writer, then, like, yeah, we might check it out. But it's not something I think either of us actively seek out or, like, are really hot under the collar for.
Yeah, I'm nodding, even though this is a audio.
I thought you said nodding.
No, God, no. So I guess before we get into the sticky of it all,
Stop.
I'm gonna ask you a fun question, I guess, and then we could talk about what we've consumed media-wise this week. So my question for you today was, what was your first R-rated movie?
It was The Matrix 3, and I don't remember any of it.
Wow, how old were you?
I think I was, like, 8.
I love that.
And my parents took me to the theater to see it.
That's really, really good. Did you see any of the other Matrixes beforehand?
No.
Why did you want to see this?
I didn't. It was like I was so young and, like, my parents couldn't find a babysitter, I guess, and my brothers wanted to see it, so they took me along. And I was at an age where it didn't even interest me. I genuinely don't remember anything about it.
Oh my God.
I don't even know if I was, like, I don't know how old I was. I guess I would have to do some math to figure that out. Mm-hmm. But I don't enjoy mathematics, so I won't. But yeah, I've never seen the Matrix movies, but I do adore the Wachowskis. I think they're wonderful. Mm-hmm. I wish Sense8 hadn't been canceled, but that's that on that. What was your first R-rated movie?
I will tell you in just a second, but when I went to go see Midsommar the second time, I was in a theater attached to a shopping mall, and to the side of me there was a mother, like, with a whole bunch of shopping bags, and then next to her was her son with headphones and an iPad.
Oh my God.
Playing games the whole entire time. And not to give spoilers to the movie, but when the cliff scene happens, I'll just leave it at that.
Oh no.
She probably didn't know about it. I mean, I was the dumb bitch who saw it on Friday and then went to go see it on Tuesday in 1 week. So, actually, no, I saw it on Saturday and then I went to go see it on Tuesday. It's not dumb.
That's incredibly intelligent. Your brain's so big.
Midsummer's, like, the only movie I've seen 3 or more times in theaters. So, I kind of was watching it out of the corner of my eye. And I was, like, also kind of watching, like, my friends' reactions at the same time. And meanwhile, like, the guy the woman starts creeping forward, and she, like, immediately panics and, like, put her hand over her son's eyes, and I was just like, literally, if you just let him chill with his iPad, like, he wouldn't even know what the fuck is going on. But
now that he knows there's something he's not supposed to see, he's peeping.
my first rated R movie, I was 7, and I watched The Royal Tenenbaums, which I feel like explains like literally everything about me as a person.
Yeah.
My mom really wanted to watch it, and she's like, well, shit, Teresa's going to bed in 2 hours, and this isn't going to be on again until like 1 a.m., and I'm not staying up till 1 a.m. She won't get anything that's going on. She could watch it, and lo and behold, baby's first rated R movie was The Royal Tenenbaums. So, I guess to segue into that, what have you been watching, reading, playing, listening to this week?
This week I've been listening to a lot of Ono, Ross, and Carrie, which is a wonderful podcast where 2 people take part in fringe medical science and religions and report back on it, which is really fun. And I've been playing a lot of Final Fantasy XIV again. I'm on Behemoth, Come At Me, and my beautiful little cat boy.
I love that. I love that
What
for you
about
that
you?
you get to be a cat boy. Live your cat boy dreams.
I wouldn't want to be a cat boy in real life.
Fair. I respect that.
Especially after what we read this week.
Yeah. Definitely.
What have you been reading this week, Teese?
So, this Friday, I went to a PowerPoint party.
That's
and my PowerPoint was on how every Matt Damon movie is connected. So
My favorite part about looking at your slides as someone who did not attend the party and didn't get to hear your presentation is that of the list of Matt Damon movies, you have seen very few of them.
out of like 85, I've seen like maybe like 12.
4. No, it's like, that's my favorite part about this.
So I ended up watching both Dogma and Elysium this week to make it work. I'm still watching The Act with my mama. I watched...
How's that going?
Oh boy. I mean, you get a play-by-play text from me every time I watch
do. Why
an
don't you
episode.
share some of that? Why don't you share some of your favorite aspects of The Act?
So, the...
Hulu exclusive series, The Act. Not sponsored.
So the Beauty and the Beast / Snow White wax play fan art really just gave me such psychic damage. Like, and the fact that it wasn't even drawn well. So, like, whose niece drew that? Or what intern got, like, dealt that card?
Do you think they commissioned that?
Like,
do you
who?
think they, like, contacted a fan artist? Or,
I don't know. And that's what scares me the most, that, like, I just don't know. And, like, I know that Disney, like, crossover fan art exists. Lord knows there's enough AMVs of it. And, like, Rise of the Brave Tangled Warrior Dragons, whatever the fuck that was called, like, that's real. And, like,
Yeah.
I know hypothetically that fan art can exist somewhere lurking on somebody's search history, which makes it worse. And when I was watching it with my mom, I was like, are you really showing wax play fan art? And my mom's like, what did you call it? And I was like, oh, Jesus Christ. Wax play? She's like, what does that mean? I was like, when you drip a candle on somebody. The character Nick, whatever his name is, like, BDSM. And my mom was like, okay, so obviously the SM part stands for sadomasochism, but what does the BD stand for? And I was like, stop asking me sex questions.
You have the internet at your disposal.
My mom's not allowed to look those up. I put a child protective lock on it. She's not allowed.
Mom, I did get an alert about some questionable search history. Do you want to talk about that? I would like to talk about.
Are you exploring your sexuality, Mom? And I also, like, literally wanted to die when I saw her wearing the rainbow braid wig and then calling him daddy. Like, I really was like, good gravy. Now is the time for me to just leave.
You're too deep in it, though.
I know. I have 2 episodes left. I'm almost done. I'll probably knock it out, like, tomorrow with her. I I also watched some fun documentaries. They're not really fun. I actually cried throughout like both of them.
Oh.
But I watched Crip Camp, which is about a group of people who went to Camp Jened, which is a camp specifically made for people who are disabled, both physically and mentally, I guess. If I didn't say that properly, I apologize. But a lot of these campers later on moved forward in the rights for pushing forward the 504 plans as well as the ADA and stuff like that. So it was really such an experience to see all of these people living their lives. And I feel like, especially if you're not disabled, a lot of times you forget what privileges you do have. And I know for a fact, people who are people who are disabled in general are the biggest minority in the country. And it's just so scary that, I mean, still to this day, we have to fight for our rights. And I mean, obviously, everybody has to, every minority group has to. I mean, there's like, I don't have to fucking preach to the choir. We all know this. But to see these active players talk about this so openly was really such a beautiful experience and all of their friendship. And I just couldn't help but cry the whole entire time. And then I also watched Circus of Books, which is a Netflix documentary about a couple who owns specifically a hardcore gay porn bookshop in California. And
hell yes.
And unfortunately, it's closure and stuff like that. So
no,
I know, it's really sad. It was a thing that was available for 33 years, and then just slowly but surely, as you know, porn is so much more accessible online now that they ended up closing their doors. But it was really delightful because it was made by the owner's daughter, and she talked. It was so much of it was like her being like, "Oh God, I didn't realize my parents owned a sex shop until I was in high school, and all my gay friends told me what it was." That's like, wow, I love that for you.
What that experience must have been like.
Oh my God.
Because you would imagine, like, if your parents are owning a sex shop, they would probably be very sex positive and talking about that with you as a kid. But there's not, that's got to be a funny dynamic.
Yeah, and they talked a lot about, like, one of the kids ended up being gay, so they talked about just their own reflection, like how can we sell to the gay community but not necessarily accept our own gay son. And like they had to do a lot of reflecting, and now like they're model members of PFLAG, which is Parents and Friends of Lesbian and Gay, which is really cool that they're like now really active in it and like they're really accepting of their son. But clearly there's still like some emotional trauma from the son who had to deal with it, you know, because let's be real, even though if somebody apologizes, there's always something still there to some degree.
It is very difficult to have a parent who is in any degree not wholly supportive. You know?
Yeah.
Talking about unsupportive parents, let's get into ABO, because that does relate to, we'll get into that. So, for anyone not familiar, ABO stands for Alpha, Beta, Omega, or sometimes otherwise referred to as the Omegaverse. There are no set rules of what necessarily this universe has to encompass, but generally speaking, you have some preset dynamics of, they are sometimes called sexes and they are sometimes called subgenders. So there's something going on there. But the basic idea is that there are assigned physiological positions within society that you are born with, where you are either an alpha, a beta, which are sometimes not present in fics, or an omega. Alphas, generally speaking, are ramped up on testosterone, they're hyper-aggressive, they're very territorial, but the mark of like an alpha across all Omegaverse fics is that they go into ruts like animals, and we're not talking about animals right now, we're talking about human beings with these characteristics. So alphas go into ruts, and they knot. And if you're not familiar with what knotting is, it presents specifically in canids, where when dogs or wolves breed, the male's penis has a like portion of tissue towards the base that swells up, called a knot, that then basically ties them to the female. I think in wolves it's for like 30 minutes after ejaculation to increase chances of conception, basically. So alpha's knot, And then omegas are like simpering, also equally horny. They go into heats and want to be bred. They self-lubricate anally, vaginally, etc. They are generally submissive, almost always submissive to an alarming degree to alphas. And they sometimes this involves mpreg. I would say the large majority of the time there are connotations of mpreg with ABO stuff.
And sometimes betas exist and sometimes they don't. It depends on the fic because, like we said, there is no set rule. And frequently betas are usually considered like a regular person. Like they have no supersized dick. They can't get pregnant despite main gender. And sometimes they're frequently like, they could purr to calm down omegas or alphas. Sometimes they're more of like a caretaker nurse role. Yeah. It's kind of like a catch-all, like in between type deal. So it really is dependent on the writer's universe, so to say.
Exactly. So one of the things I was curious about was the presence of female alphas. And I am a transmasc individual. When I say female, I'm referring to individuals who are, let's say, for all intents and purposes, cisgender women with vaginas and vulvas, uterus, etc. That's going to make talking about this episode a little bit more complicated because I do want to be inclusive in my language. But we are going to be using terms like female and male. So when we are talking about female individuals, know that we are talking about individuals that have a uteri, have a vagina, have a vulva, and when we're referring to male individuals, we're talking about individuals with a penis and testicles. So, just to clear that up.
Yeah.
But there is the existence of female alphas, and there actually was like a pretty considerable community for fem/ABO, which I was very curious about, and found out that female alphas in most of these iterations do not have a womb, and sort of similar to hyenas, have a retractable member. There doesn't seem to be a presence of testicles for the production of semen at all, because there is like an underlying sort of like cum fetish in a lot of these fics because of the breeding aspect that comes with them. Even with the presence of heterosexual and lesbian ABO fics, as with most of fandom, it does seem to be dominated more by gay MLM ships. MLM as in man-loving man, not multi-level marketing.
In some circles, there's also a fourth gender, either referred to as enigma or gamma gender. This gender is frequently popular in Binha, better known as Boku no Hero Academia fan fiction, and the enigma/gamma gender comes from Kanraku Alpha Enigma 4-verse, which is a manga. I did not write down the artist's name. It is a hentai manga. You are able to read it online if you just Google the name. And shout out to Yaoi Angel Scans for translating that whole entire awful hentai that I forced myself to read. And the general comment on it is that there is a very mysterious and powerful fourth gender that has the ability to make any of these three genders succumb to their will. So the plot of this one in particular happens to be that the one guy who is an enigma gender is able to make an alpha into an omega, and lo and behold, the enigma gender decides that he is going to sleep with this alpha and essentially coerce him into being an omega, which holds so many connotations. And reading it, I was like, this is awful. I want unalive, but I can see how this specifically works within Binha due to, I'm sorry, I usually say Binha I usually pronounce shortened acronyms of words.
Binha.
Kinny, Binha, Snick.
I think Binha is generally pretty acceptable.
People have not known what I've talked about before when I've said Binha, which is odd, but a lot of time.
The one with the superheroes.
Yeah. So with Binha, I guess that makes sense because of the aspect of quirks and changing things around and universe breaking and stuff like that with quirks. So I can see it making sense. But this specifically seems to be, I don't want to say a phenomena, but it tends to be a trope of the ABO universe within specifically Binhoff fanfiction.
And then I found what was called an unofficial guide to the Omegaverse by a user on Wattpad whose name is Velvelyami. Their guide is still up, and though there were comments by a lot of people saying they hadn't heard of some of these aspects, I did think it was worth noting. They described two other subgenders known as gammas and deltas. Gammas are basically betas that lack scent glands and knots. They're more predisposed to those maternal instincts. They are submissive to betas, deltas, and alphas, and then deltas are similar to alphas, being aggressive and territorial, and generally are submissive in the presence of alphas, so they serve more as like right-hand man, and they can induce heat in omegas, but cannot induce a rut in alphas, because there are some fics that really play up this whole scent gland thing of like pheromones and
what sniffs good.
What? I mean, some of these guides had like, you know, what all alphas should smell like, what all omegas should smell like. Like these little details of like, it is its own gender classification system underneath the initial gender binary that exists in Eurocentric countries.
I've even seen like anatomy maps for like a person's headcanon before on how alpha, beta, and omega anatomy should hypothetically look. And I was like, what am I even looking at right now?
Which, you know, I mean, adds like a whole other layer of like this weird exotification and sexualization and fetishization of intersex individuals, of transgender individuals. It is so, to deviate quickly to get to the root of it, we both read the origin fic which started ABO. Teese, if it's okay with you, I would like to read the original kink meme prompt which spawned this.
By all means.
An anonymous individual posted this to a supernatural real person fanfiction forum. It was on LiveJournal, I believe, and this is their request, word for word. AU, their world is just like ours, except in their world there are two types of men. One is the alpha male, the other is the bitch male. Alpha males are like any ordinary guy with the exception of their cocks. They work just like dog cocks. Parenthetical, the knot, tons of cum, etc. And parenthetical. The bitch male is just an ordinary guy without the special cock. I'd like to see alpha male Jared and bitch male Jensen. Jensen is a snotty prude, parenthetical, think lady from Lady and the Tramp, end parenthetical. He may be a bitch male, but he's not just going to let anybody take a go at his sweet little ass. Until he meets Jared. Then prudy little Jensen turns cock slut for Jared. Bonus points for J2 being OTP. Jensen was a virgin before Jared, and now that they've met each other, it's for life. Completely up to you if mating happens just anywhere, like in the middle of the sidewalk, in a park, etc., or on a more private level. So that's the original prompt.
Do you want to know what this was originally called?
Oh, please share.
Tramp verse.
I hate that.
I hate it. And later on, once this one particular fan fiction did catch on, the next notes of when this universe was listed on the kink meme was November 2010 and January 2011. So what kicked off this whole entire fic was I ain't no lady, but you'd be the tramp. Am I allowed to blast what the writer's name is?
Oh, yes, absolutely. So this fic is still up. It is publicly accessible. The original writer is named Te Dirtiest Sock, one word, T-E-H, for the. I think just for succinctness, we can refer to them as Sock for this.
Fair, agreed.
I have not been able to track them down as actively posting on the internet anymore. I did find some posts on LiveJournal and from their Tumblr that seemed to, like, kind of cut off in 2015. Which I would say maybe is kind of when the current fandom purity culture really kind of started to take root. So I would not be surprised on not unfortunately, but I would not be surprised if they had kind of been run off the internet or forced to adopt different pseuds. They have not been active for a few years at the very least under any of their current name or pseudonym or anything like that.
Yeah.
But this fic is up. It's on AO3. You can read it. It's incomplete. It's 3 chapters. It's 11,000 words.
And apparently it was stopped because people were not happy with where the fic was going.
Yeah. So, in the fic, I guess just to briefly synopsize, because even though that was the prompt, the writer took it in a slightly different direction, right? Mm-hmm. So, it sets itself in rural Texas. This is Jensen Ackles. This is not Dean Winchester from Supernatural. This is Jensen Ackles, the actor, and Jared Padalecki, the actor. Like,
fuck buddy, it sure is.
There's an extra. There needs to be an episode on its own just about real person fan fiction.
Yes, definitely.
But it cannot be separated from ABO and its origin. Like, that is an aspect of this, and it's believed this prompt came from a slew of other fics that were present on this forum about Jared Padalecki engaging in bestiality with his dogs. So
bad.
Yes.
The fandom as a whole did have an obsession specifically with werewolf sex, nodding interest, and all that jazz. And a lot of people do believe that it has to come from the bestiality fic. However, there's also rumors that the concept of heat is in turn from leftover days of Ackles being in a series called Dark Angel, which is where I don't really know a whole lot about it. I didn't read a synopsis. However, a lot of the characters in it have feline DNA in them. So in the show, the female characters go into ruts, but not the men. But as we know, a lot of people who write male sex only is such a bad way to put it. MLM, there we go, I'll use that. MLM relationships frequently love to give female attributes to the men that they're writing fan fiction about.
Yeah. And there's also, I mean, let's not trick ourselves either. Like, sex pollen has been a thing forever
since
in fandom.
The 60s. Yeah, exactly.
Thank you, Star Trek, you know.
Yeah.
It has always been present. It is just that all of these factors kind of came together, mutated, coalesced, and made Trampverse. So in I Ain't No Lady, But You'd Be the Tramp, Jensen Ackles is a few weeks shy of turning 18. He works at his father's diner in rural Texas. He is a virgin. He is constantly sexually harassed.
He's not a virgin.
Yes, he is.
He has sex with multiple girls.
Right. Thank you. I'm so sorry. That's
but he hasn't had his alpha virginity taken away. Oh my God, I should say.
Yes. Yeah. He hasn't been fucked in the ass.
Yeah.
So that's a factor because he's constantly being sexually harassed by the alphas in town who come into the diner specifically to flirt and
try to get in his pants.
Yeah, flirt and assault him, you know, in interchanging mixes. And then Jared shows up, good old Jared Padalecki, who
he has a lot of piercings for some reason.
Yes, he has a lot of piercings. He has super long hair, like, I guess longer than Jared Padalecki already wears his hair. And I'm gonna keep from editorializing just yet, but he shows up and he immediately flirts with Jensen's character, and it slowly escalates to the point then where they have sex. Jared Padalecki knots Jensen Ackles. I hate this.
I know.
I'm not here to shame anyone, but I do find real person fiction uncomfortable for me, and so I would say it squicks me out. It is like the one thing in fandom I don't approve of. That is going to get taken wildly out of context.
It sure is, but please everybody use your thinking caps for once.
Yes.
Yes.
So they have sex, yada, yada, yada. That's it. Like, there's... That's the core of it. I don't think we need to expound on any of the
There's a few
Jared
moments.
Jared Padalecki is married, which he only discloses to Jensen after they've had sex multiple times, and after he's forced birth control on Jensen Ackles. It's...
Jensen Ackles also doesn't come for 4 hours because he falls asleep because he didn't have the knot in him as it happened.
Oh my god. No, he gets off via free knotting, which is getting fucked but not getting the knot. So he gets cummed in and then is so overwhelmed by his own orgasm that he is like, he passes out, like full on goes unconscious, not just like I got sleepy after sex, but like is not lucid for 4 hours. And Jared Padalecki's like, I couldn't wake you up. So this means we're soulmates.
He's like, I couldn't wake you up, so I stuck my dick in you and a finger to simulate the knot. And I was like, what? What? Like, not only does that edge on then somnophilia, that's also not consent if he's sleeping. Like, I just...
Well, and it's dubcon. It is, you know, the whole thing is... I mean, the whole thing is non-consensual.
Yeah.
Because Jensen Ackles is underage. And Jared Padalecki is...
25,
yeah.
That's
Yeah.
bad. That's gross. I'm 25.
And it's not... I mean, it is explicitly stated their ages, too. So it is not in the least bit like, oh, he's 18 and about to graduate from high school. No, he is, quoted from the fanfic, 3 weeks shy of turning 18.
Like, there's this whole subplot that he is going to leave his house the day after his 18th birthday so he could still celebrate his 18th birthday with his mom. Like,
yeah,
it's not good. And I get, like, awful. It's so bad.
Yeah, it is. The sticking point for me, specifically with this fic, that I think has had monumental ripple effects throughout this sub-fandom within fandom, is that the original prompt does not ask or insinuate or demand any sort of prejudice or profiling. It is a kink prompt that just wanted kink and fetish, basically, which, you know what, fine, whatever. But Sock chose to make being a bitch analogous to being queer, and the fic interchangeably is wildly transphobic and homophobic. All bitches are forced to wear an identifying bitch band that needs to be visible at all times, which is disgusting and disturbing. And I don't mean this in a it is disgusting as a concept. I am not adverse to it being present in the fiction whatsoever, but I am adverse to the effect it has had on the fandom as a whole and on the statements it chooses to make about that. So this is not... It is not a fic, and granted, it was written in 2010, which... I will say
a lot of things have changed socially in fan-based circles since 2010. Like, I know 10 years ago doesn't seem long, especially with the internet. However, we as, like, fandom circles and the accessibility to knowledge has so vastly moved forward that this stuff that, like, we said in 2009 not thinking about is something that, like, I would never hear a 14-year-old currently say now.
Exactly. So. If this fic came out now, I mean, one, I don't think it would have as big of an impact.
It would be a lot more like hush-hush.
Exactly. Which, good or bad, you know? We don't quite know. The one that really killed me was, so Jensen Ackles is referred to a he bitch throughout, which already has like a weird... Is. It felt reading it like reading the word she-male.
Yeah, definitely. Because it was supposed to embarrass and it feels like it's
it was always said with a derogatory term. Yeah.
It was incredibly hostile. It felt like, in a way, when Jensen would say it about himself, he clearly said it with anger and bitterness in it, and he almost would use it for himself to degrade himself, but
Yeah.
it clearly, and like, yeah, I guess he could try to reclaim it. There was also this whole weird subplot about like Omega rights as a whole.
Yes, that was like just sort of like barely teased in the background,
Yeah.
where Jared Padalecki, you know, is like involved in the movement out in California, where Jensen idealizes going and living as soon as he turns 18. And Jared Padalecki is like, oh, but I'm also ostracized by that movement because I'm an alpha and I believe in nodding, which is just, it's a take on feminism and overall equality, equity discussions without nuance that is very characteristic of being written in 2010 and likely by a person who was not firsthand involved in these circles. I tried to look it up. I could not find Sock's age listed anywhere. I could not find anything about Sock's gender identity, who they really were as a person outside of this fandom, just based on like a cursory search. I'm sure if I dug long and deep enough, maybe I would have found something, but I'm not necessarily here to critique a writer who wrote a piece in 2010.
Yeah, I mean, who knows what they're writing now, and if they're even writing for that matter.
Yeah. But the thing that really, really fucked me up was the term bitch bashed, because at that point it became very evident to me, like there was no arguing the fact that like, okay, this for you is clearly analogous to gay rights, transgender rights, like, and that word in specific was just used so casually and without thought and without consideration, I feel like, at least. And as somebody who has been the victim of attacks like that, it was infuriating to see that trivialized to make a character more prone, more vulnerable, more accessible for someone to take sexual advantage of.
Yeah, it was, I mean, it was not good. It was ugly. It was like, hey, look at us. We're trying to kind of world build, but in turn it felt more like a slap in the face more than anything else.
Yeah, you know, it's a lot like fantasy writers who decide they're going to make an analogous struggle to slavery, right? And it's like, did you know that people experience more than pain and suffering, and there's richness to cultures and identities that doesn't revolve around, you know, oppression? Which is, I mean, that is the root of the problem with this progenitor fic. And I'm just gonna, I mean, Jensen fantasizes about moving to California, where he won't have to wear a bitch band, where it's illegal to even ask about his status, where marriage might be legalized for him. There's a very good old boy sort of tone with it being set in rural Texas, and I feel it so strongly. Like, I have Southern family, and like, his dad is never named. His dad is referred to as Dad with a capital D multiple times.
As well as his mom is too, I think.
Yeah. I mean, his sister is named, which leads to another complicating factor, is that his sister's name is Jen, which is just Jen. And then when they're having sex, like, the dirty talk from Jared Padalecki to Jensen Ackles, and I keep saying their full names because I don't want you to forget this is about real people, it's very degrading, and it is meant to like feminize him.
Yeah,
like
Jared
he calls him
a
Jenny, and he calls him a good girl. It's like, yikes. And yikes.
Doesn't he also call him like a he-bitch straight to his face too when they have sex? Like,
oh yeah, like it's a totally acceptable term. And
it's such perfect, like, it's so performative allyship. Like, yes, I will march in the rights of you people, but I'm still gonna be a freak ass and call you a he bitch and not treat you like a fucking person when I have sex with you, because at the end of the day, I still will always have power over you, and you will always have to be submissive to me because this is our biological genders.
And that's the really upsetting thing too, is it is a power dynamic that is baked into biology. So it's
Which
like
is so
in these
disgusting
universes,
to begin with. Ugh.
yeah, I mean, it is a fascinating concept to explore, but that Jared Padalecki is framed as a savior in this context, and for the most part illuminated as an example of a good person, despite the fact that, like, their very first interaction is Jared Padalecki demanding a smile out of Jensen Ackles, which is, like, number one douchebag thing on the street to say, like, especially to a waiter, and then he grabs his wrist where his quote-unquote bitch band is. It is just, there's a bigger discussion too, where the relationship and the age gap that takes place here has the hallmark of pederastic relationships, which are very common in MLM queer stories, because unfortunately that has been the experience of, I'm not going to say many or most, but that has been the experience of a significant portion of gay men, where the first person to show interest in them, to make them feel like an adult, is an adult male who's grooming them.
I was going to say, do you feel like this is a grooming story?
Absolutely.
I was going to say, I feel like it is.
Absolutely.
Because, I mean, let's be real, Jensen had no true interest. Like, he was more mystified by what Jared looked like. Like, oh my God, I've never seen somebody who looks like him before. He's clearly not there. And I don't want to use the term exotic because, like, he's a white man from California. How is he fucking exotic? Like, he's not a peacock. Like, he's just a fucking guy from California.
In the context of Jensen's world, which is rural Texas, he is.
It's unfamiliar, it's strange, and it's exciting. So Jared immediately has this hold over him that no other man in his hometown does. Mm-hmm. And because Jared is originally from this area, but has grown out and has become somebody from the West Coast, Jensen is immediately emotionally attached to the concept of him, clearly, because in a way, I feel like he can see his future in Jared. And I think Jared uses that to his advantage, because Jensen's like, oh shit, I'm from the South. I want to go to California. I want to fight for my rights. And he mentions, like, that he wants to marry a girl and hold her hand in public and shit like that. Yeah. And, like, Jared has the ability too, you know?
Yeah, it's not totally... It's one of the weird aspects that's not written out in stone, but, like, this idea that, like, because he is an omega male, he is not able to have a relationship with a woman, which is also interesting because it then seems to... Well, I guess, based on the original prompt, that women don't have subgender. It is just males.
Yeah.
Which...
It's a whole other bag of worms, babes.
Yeah. There's... Talking about Jared's performative allyship, like, reading Jared as a character in this is red flag city.
Yes.
Of, like, I have met this man. I have dealt with this man.
Yeah.
This is not a good man.
I have too. I really agree with you on there big time.
And
I could think of, like, several men that I've met.
And I do want to reiterate again, I don't have a problem at all with a character like this. What I do have a problem with, though, is that the text frames him as a good person, as, you know, a person that can be trusted, as a reliable individual, as someone that it is appropriate for Jensen to look up to. And granted, like, Jensen is very much an unreliable narrator, but the overall surrounding text still reinstates that Jared is a good person.
Yes.
There is a moment where Jensen asks why Jared cares so much about equal rights when he is just as guilty as having sniffed around Jensen like every other alpha. And Jared says to him, we're not all the enemy.
And you were sniffing around too.
Like, not just sniffing, but, like, you full-on grabbed him. This was not like you were friends. You came into a diner, you sprawled out in the booth, and this waiter came out and was like, what do you want? And you were like, can I get a smile? And when he said no, you grabbed him by the wrist and pulled him in.
That's, like my worst nightmare. Like, it's so... Like, I just...
And it was like the text for a moment almost started to call out the fact that like his allyship is so performative and it's not right. And you got the inkling that like maybe there is a subplot under here, and like maybe this story could like take a left turn and say, you know, Jared gets out to California and he's like, oh shit, you're the villain.
Yeah.
But it never got finished, so we don't know that.
And Sock made their author's note at the end of the third chapter was like, oh, well, the fans were pissed about the concept of Jared's wife. Maybe one day I will publish the rest of my notes for where this fic goes. And then also mentions that, keep in mind, Jensen does like women and Jensen does want to sleep with women. So there's these pieces of moments where this could very much give us a better universe and a more fleshed out way for Jensen to figure out why the fuck Jared is wrong. And yet, due to the concept of fans being angry that Jensen and Jared might not be endgame because Jared has a wife, literally stop the writer from continuing to write this fan fiction, which says so much about how fans of Supernatural, and I guess fans of Jensen and Jared as a couple, have this demand and assumption that these men cannot have a relationship with women because they are so intrinsically tied to each other.
Yeah. And I mean, there's also this sort of like ending hanging plot thread. I mean, they're all hanging plot threads, but that Jared and his wife are only married as a sort of beard situation.
Yes.
Wherein neither of them are... Exactly. Neither of them are romantically or sexually interested in one another anymore, but being an alpha, he offers her protection so that she is able to live a life free from the sort of harassment that Jensen goes through, which, oh my god, that is also something huge to unpack. I mean, if you are a femme individual, if you are a woman, you have probably experienced, you know, a man hitting on you and only listening to you when you say, oh, I have a boyfriend. This, or not being able to go out and walk around somewhere without a man present, because for some reason that is that's just an unfortunate experience, and it is the American experience of being a woman, of walking around and not feeling safe unless there is some sort of built-in protection, because other men view other men as being like, that's the wall. That's the thing that I have to listen to. I don't respect her opinion, but I'm going to respect the fact that like she is already quote unquote taken, which like, yikes. All of this said though, with this being your establishing fic, it sets up this genre for an incredibly complicated relationship with transness and its ideas of sex as they relate to gender. Because, hi, we are two queer individuals, but if you are cis or maybe don't know this, sex and gender are not the same thing. Gender is a social construct. There's no like scientific backing to it. It is a social construct. And I mean that in like the biological scientific sense. So the idea of a man, of a woman, of what a non-binary individual is, like these are all things that are made within a culture and a society, which is why you'll also see varying gender expression across different cultures, why some cultures have very different ideas of the gender spectrum, etc. Whereas sex, as we have defined it, which is not limited to two, there are not two human sexes, there are far more than we are even just beginning to understand, but sex is based on sex characteristics, on chromosomes, on the I don't want to say physical presentation because that gets into aesthetics, but when I say physical presentation, I mean the presentation of those sex characteristics, such as breasts, such as the influence of different hormones, whether that be testosterone, whether that be estrogen, androgens, etc. So, sex and gender are not the same thing, but ABO universes have in naming them subgenders, they have inherently tied them to gender as a concept, even though these quote-unquote subgenders are biological. So they're more sex characteristics, and they are more linked to sex than they ever are to gender, you know? The presence of ABO as a whole, to me, feels like an attempt to push gay men in specific, speaking about cis gay men, into more binary roles that are more genetically defined. And so they're more rigid and definable and quantifiable. And the idea being that a predetermined law of these universes makes it so there's not nuance. As someone who's also guilty of making these jokes, like the constant joke of like, oh, does he top or does he bottom? And like looking at a person and looking at their mannerisms, looking at how they dress and being like, oh, he's totally a bottom. Like, that's not... There's a difference between a queer person making those jokes and a difference between straight people making those jokes.
Yes.
As evidenced by the fact that, at my table at Anime Next, I had 2 tip jars, and you could vote whether Ignis Scientia was a top or a bottom. And most people were really good-natured about this, and we had, like, fun conversations.
That's how we started to talk, yeah.
Exactly. Just about, like, the characters. Not about, like, their sex, but, like, it was just, like, a stupid joke that I, as a queer, trans-masc individual, was making. But a teenage boy came up to me, and... Oh, so he put $1 in the bottom jar, and then I was like, nah, like, you're wrong. Like, Ignis is a top. And this teenage boy proceeded to go off on me about how, because Ignis Scientia is a character from Final Fantasy 15, cooks, because he's maternal, because he handles scheduling, because because he drives, and like because he dresses in an effeminate fashion, like he wears purple, these all mean that he's a bottom. And like there's no, we can't divorce this all from like the fact that like yaoi as a genre and BL as genres have stereotypically made the role of being a quote-unquote bottom a more effeminate position. Like the term uke in yaoi specifically, like almost always means that man is smaller, he is more effeminate, he has a higher voice, a more slight body than the other man. Like he is, I mean, in most yaoi, a lot of times like an uke is confused or mistaken for a woman at first glance.
He's very innocent. He's very effeminate.
Yes.
Very usually not knowledgeable.
And so ABO feels like a response by a lot of times cis writers to try and understand the complexity and gender diversity in queer relationships. And I mean, like, that's not to say that queer people don't write or read ABO. They do, and some of them write fucking incredible stuff. Like, I don't want anyone to get the wrong impression. There's some ABO shit that's like really fucking good and really fucking fascinating. But the root fic of I ain't a tramp, but you're a lady, whatever the fuck it's called. I ain't no lady, but you'd be the tramp, right? Is that
yes,
like
I ain't no lady, but you'd be the tramp, yes.
Yeah. It has left this indelible mark on this genre that has set it up to have these very narrow ideas of what sex and gender are, of how these relationships actually function in the real world. And I think it has inadvertently, I mean, I'm not going to say done a considerable amount of harm. I don't think it's that bad. But I do think it has definitely made some people a little bit more narrow-minded, I'm certain. And
especially about male relationships as well. I feel like, I mean, we always talk, like, the whole joke of, like, who's the handmaid and the feudal lord, who's into that. There's always this demand to gender each I mean, they're two men in a relationship. They're not a man and a woman. It's two men. You
got who wears the pants?
Like, I'm wearing my own pants, babe.
Who's got more sun energy and who's got more moon energy? Like, they are all just ways to rephrase the very base question of like, yeah, but who's the woman?
Yeah, and they're men. At the end of the day, they're men. And frankly, no two relationships are the same. Like, how can you demand something that doesn't even exist within a relationship of a same-sex couple, you know? It's just physically impossible. I did read an essay. Can I talk about that for a moment?
Absolutely. I would love to hear about it.
So I purchased Fic, Why Fanfiction is Taking Over the World by Anne Jameson. It is technically an anthology. This is the only essay that I've read in it so far. However, I'm definitely going to be consulting this book very often. I'm very excited that I purchased it. And the essay I specifically read for this episode was Ponfar, Mpreg, Bonds and the Rise of Omegaverse, written by Christina Bussey? Not sure. Busse, everybody. That's their last name.
Shout out to my roommate's dog, Bussy. He just turned 12.
We love that Bussy. I love him. So this specific piece talks about, well, where did this come from? What's the appeal of it? And I learned that apparently within modern fan fiction, Harry Potter is responsible for popularizing bestiality kinks. However, Supernatural, specifically J2 fan fiction, is responsible for bestiality on a large scale being in non-magical fandoms, which I thought was so wild. Because like in Harry Potter, Remus Lupin, I'm going to have sex with you. And there's werewolf sex. And then with J2, it's the combination of all the things that we mentioned earlier combining into one thing. And especially with the topic of supernatural, though it's not hypothetically magic, it is supernatural. So it makes sense that there was some aspects of werewolves to begin with, and then lo and behold, because of dark angels combining the two, frequently werewolves were used. And I never realized that like you could technically call werewolf human bestiality. I didn't realize that until I read it, and I was like, I guess you're right.
I
right?
guess. I
Yeah.
mean, well, I guess the question for me is like, okay, so when I think of bestiality, when I think of bestiality, for me, what categorizes it as being that is like the fact that an animal can't consent. Right?
Yeah, I was gonna say no consent from an animal. That's how I
like,
always
that
felt
defines
it,
it for me. But I mean, I guess like a werewolf is a beast technically, and let me get that Google definition. So the definition for bestiality is sexual intercourse between a person and an animal. But humans are animals.
Fuck buddy. They really are.
This just in, that quiet 7 p.m. sex you had with the lights off in the missionary position under the good eyes of God with your wife, that's bestiality.
So this author also talks about, well, why is ABO so attractive to people? Because I feel like, wouldn't you think that like all the negatives about this and all like the quote unquote bad things about bestiality, wouldn't you think that all the quote unquote bad things about Omegaverse would in fact like turn you off to this? So what?
Nah.
So like, what's appealing? Like, do you see any? I mean, we both have read ABO to some degree. What do you find appealing about it? Do you have a reason, or it's kind of like, well, damn, this do be sounding good, and then just read it?
So I mean, little column A, little column B, but my column B is that I do find it really fascinating when authors kind of, I mean, tackle what it is to be assigned something and not identify with it. So I guess a lot of times like the ABO I read is specifically about individuals who are, or they begin to present quote unquote in a way that they don't personally identify with, or that they never expected from themselves, or like deviates from their family lineage, and like they're coming to terms with that, because I do think stories like that are really fascinating to me. I joked with you, but I mean, for everybody, if this were a YouTube video, hit that like button if you think being knotted is kind of hot.
What did we also took ABO tests, by the way, to see what
we did. Oh god, yeah, we did. I specifically I hit up my friend group chat and was like, guys, I need you to help me answer some of these questions because I need to see myself from the outside, and I couldn't. Hey Teese, what's your subgender?
I got alpha, which is really funny to me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, sure, I guess I'm an alpha. I
got omega, which kind of offends me.
I was honestly expecting to get beta. Honestly, it's happened.
Yeah, because you're a normal fucking person.
Yeah, I'm a fucking sapiosexual, I guess.
Benedict Cumberbatch rolling up Yeah, where's my Teese Benedict Cumberbatch RPF? I don't think you even like Benedict Cumberbatch.
I don't.
I don't condone RPF, especially not of me. How dare you?
No. I mean, you know what? Maybe if it's kind of hot, I'd be into it myself. But
yeah, but
I mean, I'm pro clone fuck, by the way. So I guess I could maybe get behind Teese real person fan fiction, but I don't want to read it for anybody else. I've read one on the request of a friend, and I don't want to really do it again.
Until this week, I had never read real person fan fiction, and this week I had to read so much of it, and I'm so bitter about that.
Welcome to my fucking life. I feel like I radiate fucking.
Hold on. Question. Yes. Total deviation from the topic. So you know about After the Harry Styles fanfiction?
What?
Do you know about After the Harry Styles fanfiction?
No.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to cut this out, but there's a there was a fan fiction that was written on Wattpad, and it was a self-insert character and Harry Styles, right?
Is this when her mom sells her to Harry Styles?
No.
Damn it.
But this fic got picked up then, and it's been made into a movie, but they had to change the character's name and everything, right?
Obviously.
So if you're reading After with Harry Styles' name changed to Harden, are you still reading real person fan fiction?
In theory?
Okay.
Yeah, I think so. Because if you think about, when I found out that...
They made his hair short, though. And I mean, Harry Styles would never have short hair.
Unfortunate. I mean, when I was reading City of Bones, and then I found out that Cassandra Clare really just be changing the names of her stolen Harry Potter fanfiction, I was like, this makes a lot of sense. A lot of sense. So, that's a fun one. But I guess to go back to the podcast.
Yeah. I think ABO can be interesting and well handled, just like most anything else. And I don't read fan fiction in place of reading erotic literature for masturbatory reasons or anything. But I mean, some of it's hot. It's well written. It's engaging. It's interesting.
Yeah. I mean, there's one ABO fan fiction that I've returned back to multiple times because I actually did really enjoy it. And that, once again, that kind of played on the whole coming to terms with yourself. I don't want to give away, I don't want to out this fic because I don't want anybody to attack anybody, and frankly I don't need people knowing about all my awful fan fiction choices. However,
it's okay to keep some of them secret. That's fine.
Yeah. In particular, there are 2 for one fandom that I really enjoy. I think I've read maybe 5 ABO fics total, truthfully. But 2 from one fandom I really enjoy. And the appeal of this fan fiction is that the more heavily masculine character is the Omega. And later on, the Omega does in fact bone the Alpha instead of the Alpha boning the Omega, which I thought was pretty good. And I thought
did they free knot?
Did they free knot? I mean, no. He knotted inside.
Get it.
But the Omega did in fact come in the Alpha at one point, if I recall correctly. It was good, I guess. I hope my mom never listens to this podcast. However, this author talks about what's the appeal, and in a way the concept of, so I really know nothing about Star Trek, so For people who do know about Star Trek, the author talked about Ponfar and the kind of that comes from the Amok Time episode of Star Trek, and it's kind of basically what we now call fuck or die. And I don't think necessarily Alpha, Beta, Omega is in fact fuck or die. However, the need to quote unquote be fulfilled during your heat/your rut clearly has this urgency to it, which I guess some people find very sexy and very charged. And like,
there are some fics that do make it fuck or die.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah, they do cross over quite a bit.
Yeah. So the person also does in fact mention the whole like animalistic instinct of it all, which is whatever. And a lot of people who happen to write this trope as a whole are usually women. And I think because of that, that also then kind of gives a way for women to explore sexuality and pregnancy in a way where they could still be detached. To quote this specific piece, the author writes, MPreg allows female writers to play out themes of female bodies, concerns of gender and relationships, and issues of reproduction. And she can interrogate all of these ideas in a setting that allows for a certain emotional distance by divorcing the pregnancy from the female body. And I was like, yeah, this makes a lot of sense. Because, like, let's be real. Sometimes we want to experience things, but it not happen to us. So I guess, like, you're going to then put it to fucking supernatural actors, I guess. So there's also this appeal that, like, wolves mate for life. And the idea of, like, you always will know what I'm thinking because we are so in sync. We're soulmates. There's like that whole my mind is your mind thing. We're on the same page, but to an extreme version. And just combined, I could see this being a very emotionally important thing for people. However, I'm just like, oh, this is weird. I don't want to even see the word the knot in a sentence, despite reading about the knot.
And that idea too of like inherent mating, right? Like for life, like to me always reminds me of the very aggressive anti-premarital sex campaigning by a lot of Christian organizations.
Oh my God, yes.
You release a certain hormone after you have sex with someone and it initially bonds you to them, you know, for life. But the more and more you form those bonds, the less and less strong they get. And I think...
What, you ran out of light bond juice? Like...
Exactly. I wrote the prevalence of both biological and sociological changes with ABO and the presence of often invasive medicine and propaganda that we see in these fics, I think may also be a way by which authors explore their own feelings of invasion and the incessant need by government to label us. There's no reason for your sex to be listed on your driver's license. Don't get at me about medical shit. Don't.
It really shouldn't. Like
nobody needs that information, you know? But it causes so many problems. And again, like, there's nothing inherently wrong with ABO, but ABO demands discussion of what it says about us as people, that these are things that appeal to us, and these are things that, you know, we find appealing. Like, why do we find it appealing to put men in these positions where, you know, they're being raped or sexually assaulted, and it is biologically demanded by heats or ruts or what have you. And I mean, like, there's a whole litany of discussions for that. Some statistics, though, just as like some good numbers to kind of remind ourselves that this is not all a phantom. Supernatural, as of March 2020, all of these numbers are as of March 2020. Supernatural has the highest number of works in the ABO tag with 5,701 fics. This makes up just 0.02% of the fics present in this fandom on AO3. Supernatural real person fanfiction, however, has 4.8% of its fics with the ABO tag. Oh my God. Yuri on Ice has the highest percentage of ABO fics for its fandom on AO3 with 5.43%.
And that's like unsurprising, I feel like, because specifically with Yuri on Ice, the two most popular ships include, I mean, the actual canon ship of a teacher protege situation. Let's be real, it's a teacher coach thing.
Yeah.
I mean, coach-student situation. I mean, skater-coach, teacher-student, whatever the fuck you want to call it. And in terms, Yuri does look up to Victor, and it's a very emotionally charged situation where he is being trained, quote unquote.
Mm-hmm.
So even it's a power dynamic. I feel
Yeah.
like at the end of the day, I feel like ABO appeals to a power dynamic in
Yeah.
that situation. You know,
And there's nothing inherently wrong with that. I mean, the core of this podcast is just the importance of discussing those things and understanding why they take place. You know, it's never going to be like, this is 100% bad and this is 100% good, but understanding the nuance and, like, the context in which these things arise. To jump backward a little bit, though, I do think there is a portion of ABO which I can really understand being about women trying to tackle and understand hyper and toxic masculinity.
Yes.
Because, like, that is the core of the alpha character. Like, the alpha archetype is super hyper toxic masculinity, controlling, demanding, and there's a power that the omega character has in being able to satiate, to calm, to basically turn an alpha into putty if they so decide, because they're giving them the privilege of their body, of being able to breed, of being able to not. And so I do think for, like, anyone who maybe identifies with, like, more of an omega character style, right, it is a safe way for them to engage in, you know, attacking and sort of deconstructing that masculinity, to understand its roots and to confront it, which is, again, I mean, that's what we do when we write. No matter in what form, in some way we are confronting something. And that fandom is a discussion from fans to creative content, to try and understand things, to enumerate on things, to play with them, you know? All that said, next week, we've got a really fun court case. Do you want to give us a little tease about what that's on, Teese?
So in 2018, somebody, her name is Addison Kane, I believe. Yes, Addison Kane, who was a frequent publisher of male-female Omegaverse original fiction novels, decided to sue author Zoe Ellis in a defamation lawsuit, and was like, hey, you plagiarized my ideas. And Zoe Ellis is like, what the fuck are you talking about? I just happen to also write male-female Omegaverse. Nobody owns this specific genre. It was made on the internet by a group of people. And so this lawsuit has been going on since 2018. Addison Kane does have a history of sending out cease and desists to authors who also write Omegaverse. And there's this whole fascinating marketplace of ebooks, erotic ebooks on Amazon and other small, other small e-publishers. And there's this whole lawsuit that is slowly blossoming out of this situation. So next week, we are going to talk about this lawsuit. I might try and read both books if I'm truly feeling absolutely bonkers. I'm not 100% sure.
Depending on the length, I may attempt to read both of them as well.
Yeah. So we will see. I found links to them. So
I'll have my computer read them to me.
That's so smart. I read fast though, so I should be okay.
The knot enters.
It's okay.
The knot enters the vagina. It swells. There is gum everywhere.
Microsoft Sarah, is that you?
Her breasts, boob, boobly. I'm going to hell. I'm going to hell. And if it's not for my parents hearing me say cum fetish, it's for so many other reasons. But yeah, so next week we'll talk about this wonderful lawsuit and hopefully tie a nice little knot on our discussion about ABL.
Oh boy.
Did you like that?
Sure.
Did you like that joke?
I sure
I'm really proud of it.
I sure did.
Until next time, my name's Cass. You can find more of my work on Twitter at Valhethella. That's Valhethella. Valhethella.
My name is Teese, and you could follow me at Vicuñad, Vicunad. I also am a part of another podcast called Fresh Podcast Market, and you could also find me there. Our theme song is by James Wayulo. He is a composer. You should give him a Google.
And our cover art is by Nyaliest on Twitter, Nyalliest. Hopefully we'll see you next week. And until then,
wait
safe.
A second. You could also follow us.
Yeah, you can reach out to us. If you have any questions or suggestions, reach out to us at Gmail at authorsnotepod@gmail.com. And until then, hopefully we'll see you next week. And until then, stay safe.